Network, Disney, and much, much more. Arie Kaplan, welcome to the show.
Hi, great to be here. Thanks, guys.
It's an
Yeah, thanks
absolute
for
pleasure
coming
to have
on.
you.
We appreciate you.
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Brian.
Yeah, welcome to the show, Ari. Yeah, you've have a very extensive career, worked on many pretty prominent projects. So, if you don't mind, can you give us a little bit of recap on some of your more significant works?
Sure. Yeah, for a while at the beginning of my career, I was mostly known as a scriptwriter for Mad Magazine, where I was writing humor pieces for them. And then around that time,
Oh, wow.
I guess around in total, I've written like around 20, 29 or 30 humor pieces for Mad. In fact, one of the things I wrote for Mad recently, it was shortly before the pandemic. That recently was what if Batman was really 80 years old, and it was like making fun of the fact that it was Batman's 80th birthday, and I was like, what if Batman were actually 80 years old? And it's been reprinted so many times that it was reprinted for Batman's 85th birthday as what if Batman were really 85 years old. So that all they have to do is update that, that
Right.
thing over there with the title. But and around the time I started writing for Mad, because they were humor pieces and because I was writing some spec scripts for different TV shows and trying to get in television, I started getting writing jobs for different TV shows, mostly freelance, but with one exception, where I was on staff at World's Dumbest, which was a true TV comedy series with a revolving cast, and it was a show where people would send us video clips of themselves and their friends doing stupid things, and we would write comedy sketches and jokes making fun of the clips. And so my Mad background and also my background writing comedy sketches for a sketch troupe that we would perform at different clubs all over New York, all that experience like paid off working for that show, working for World's Dumbest. And even more recently, I'd say, because some of the animated kids shows I've worked on recently, like Charlie's Colorform City on Netflix, and Hey Fuzzy Yellow on RTE Player, which is an international co-production. It's not viewable in the United States yet, but it's viewable in various and it's streaming and airing in various
How soon can we expect it in the US?
I don't know right now. That's a really good question. I don't know. But I know that it's airing in a lot of parts of Europe, and let's see, it's airing at various other parts of the world as well, like Central and South America as well.
Okay. And it's being well received so far?
Yeah, people seem to like it. They seem to be
Nice.
like, their videos people are making about it on YouTube and stuff, and it's getting a fair amount of like social media traction and everything. And people seem to like it. And it's like the easiest way I can explain it, just again because it's not available here right now, is that it's sort of like Saturday Night Live for preschoolers in a way, because it's like 6 to 8 little really short comedy sketches per episode, and each episode is like 11 minutes in total. So and each of those sketches teaches kids about creativity and storytelling and fundamental things about that kind of stuff. And it was so much fun, and of course there's a curriculum of like math and science and things of that nature that you have to work in there as a writer as well. And also it was my first time writing song lyrics for a show. Song lyrics that actually got produced. I had written songs for a couple of episodes of World's Dumbest, but they got cut. The songs got cut before air,
Yeah.
which happens. But on Hey Fuzzy Yellow, they did not get cut. And so that was really nice, because it's nice to see, oh, look, I wrote the lyrics to that song. That's cool. It actually made it to air. That's really gratifying, because that was a goal I'd had for quite a while. And I know there are a lot of kids' TV shows where they have original songs, whether you're talking about like Adventure Time or Hey Fuzzy Yellow or Charlie's Colorform City, which was another show I worked on, but I didn't work on any of the episodes that were musical episodes.
Or bring it back to Barney.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And Sesame Street. And so, children's television has a rich history of of original songs, and it's a lot of fun writing that stuff. It's a lot of fun seeing it like finally animated, and when everyone's, the vocalists have sung their parts and everything.
Are you a musician or producer as well?
I am
In
not.
addition? No.
I'm not a musician. The closest I've come to producing is what again when I was head writer for the sketch troupe, and this was a long time. I even call it like sort of before I had a career, because this was the closest. I guess you could technically say it counts as a career, because I was performing and writing sketches at like Stand Up New York and New York Comedy Club and all these other comedy spaces and comedy clubs all around Manhattan, even places that didn't have New York in the title. But you know, I wasn't really making a living off of it. We were getting paid for doing these comedy shows, but all the budget would go like right into the next episode, next show rather. I'm thinking in terms of episodes now because of my TV background, but they would go into the net. We would put the budget into the next show, so we really weren't like props and costumes and things like that, whatever special effects we needed. So puppets, always try to work puppets into everything.
Nice.
So you know, I wasn't really keeping any of the money. No one was really. We were just doing it because we loved it and we wanted to like help us get a career in comedy, a career in television, a career in writing scripts and making people laugh. And you know, that's eventually what happened.
So like, are there any differences when writing primarily for European audiences versus American audiences? Like anything to keep in mind?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, Hey Fuzzy Yellow was an American, and I should say I only 2 episodes of that I'm like that. I'm the major creative force. It was created by a guy named Mon Swanberg, who's really he's a creative powerhouse, and he created the show and also like had a real vision for it. Mick Paul Smith, who is the head writer for that show, is also incredibly talented. I'd worked with him before as well, before he hired me to work on Hey Fuzzy Yellow. But I should say that I wasn't in charge of like writing the scripts for the European audience or for the, you know, Central and South American audience or anything like that. That was done by other people. I did see one of the episodes that I worked on. I saw like the UK version of the script, and it was interesting to see what they changed for that audience. However, I wasn't in charge of that. So it was like, because it was an American and European co-production, it was like 4 different countries partnering to make the show. And I was basically largely working for the US production partner, if that makes sense. So they were hiring other people to like localize it.
Okay.
So like, how did you get your first job at, or your job at Mad Magazine? Because that's like a really prominent, that's one of the most prominent comedic magazines.
Yeah. No, thank you. Well, okay, so here's what happened. I interned for Mad Magazine at college. I was studying playwriting and screenwriting at NYU, and
good school.
Yeah. And I just finished paying off my student loans after, I don't want to say how many years, but I realized there was this thing, you could actually become an editorial intern there. And so I applied and got in, and you actually got paid for doing that when I was there, which was astounding because it was an internship. Most of those are unpaid. And it wasn't like a ton of money, but the fact that you were getting paid at all was kind of extraordinary. And
100%.
Yeah. And when you're an intern there, I think I did this over a summer between my freshman and sophomore year. So you get to know the editors pretty well, and you get to know what kind of humor pieces they're looking for from their writers. And I got to know some of the artists, some of the cartoonists, and some of the writers, and sort of like asked them for advice. And then years and years later, after I hadn't thought seriously about writing for Mad, because I was like, well, I don't know if my style really lends itself to Mad Magazine. They have a very specific voice, you know, and within that specific voice, you can distinguish yourself and sort of like let your obsessions, your creative obsessions play out. Like, you know, if you write jokes of, if your thing is you write jokes about like pop music or hip hop or whatever, you write a lot of jokes about music, about the music scene. Or if you write jokes about like film and television, you know what I mean? That's your area. Or if it's like a little bit of the above, if you've got like a really dark sense of humor and it's like a really morbid, and you know what I mean? Or you bring like a horror comedy vibe to it somehow. Like there's people who've done that, you know, if you do a lot of relationship humor. So there's people who like distinguish themselves in certain ways. But I didn't think that the Mad style was something that I could really get a handle on. But that having been said, so a couple of years after graduation, what happened was I started doing stand-up comedy. And I realized, and I was also head writing this sketch troupe. And there was one sketch that I wrote for everybody called Meanwhile in the Bizarro World, which is a big DC kid, which is funny because as an adult, I've written a lot of Marvel themed children's books, which I'm sure we'll
Nice.
get to in a few minutes if you guys like. But and eventually I would write some scripts for DC Comics as well when I started writing comics and graphic novels. But as a kid, I was really into the Bizarro Superman stories. And so I wrote this sketch called Meanwhile in the Bizarro World. And it was like Bizarro versions of different celebrities. And it was just really cruel, making fun of different celebrities, but like the Bizarro World version of them, talking in the sort of Bizarro Captain Caveman kind of voice. Like, the jokes that I wrote for that don't age well. Let's just put it that way. But I sent
So
it to,
you did mention stand up. I wanted to ask that, have you ever done stand up? What was that like? Because I mean, it seems really rough when you're in the smaller clubs. It's very different from, Dave Chappelle doing a concert where there's 5,000 people and you're in a big arena. It seems like these smaller clubs, you'll get hecklers. So what was that experience like for you?
I found it fairly, I don't want to say easy is the wrong word, because nothing's easy, and certainly in creative, in performing arts and visual arts and things like that, nothing's really easy. Getting good is like a long and involved process, and so that having been said, I found it relatively easy to write jokes that were actually not terrible, and relatively easy to go up on stage and not bomb terribly. Again, that being said, it takes a while until you're actually good at this, So I'm being very careful about how to phrase this. But basically, what happened, just to get back to the whole Bizarro thing for a minute and how that led to Mad Magazine, is just very quickly. The other people in the sketch comedy troupe, which was called the Famous Corporation, they said, they were like, the Bizarro thing, it's a little too elaborate to do it on stage, because you'd have to create all these Bizarro Superman outfits and everyone would have to be in like elaborate makeup making fun of these different celebrities, and like they were like, didn't you used to intern for Mad Magazine? And I was like, yeah, and then you should send that to Mad. That way they could draw it up. The cartoonist could draw this really well, and it could be something for Mad. And I did, and they didn't buy it, but they said the editor there that I had interned for back in college, Joe Raiola, was like, we're not going to buy this, but this is on the right track. You're on the right track here. This is definitely close to something that we would buy.
Right.
That and something, I can't remember what, but there was something else that I sent them that they were like, oh, this is kind of close. Like, and there were a couple of things that they were like, oh, we're going to look at this for a bit, and we're debating whether to buy it or not. I was like,
so kind of what direction were they really wanting it to be in, to be, publish ready, let's say?
I think first of all, it needs to have, that's a really good question, but I think that first of all, it needs to have like a certain number of jokes that are good enough where you're like, okay, the premise can sustain a lot of really good jokes. Cause like at least like 4 or 5 good ones that are in the pitch, where you're like, okay, this can be, this can lend itself, it's not going to be like pulling teeth to get like good jokes out of this, out of this comedy area, out of this premise. And so for this one, I don't know that there were any great jokes. There were a couple of others. One of them was like self-improvement builders. It was like a self-help thing. It was like a parody of like self-help books. And I don't even remember what the jokes were for that, but there were some pretty good jokes. But that didn't make it in. And this was like around July or August. I'm not going to say what year because it was a long time ago. And if I think too long about how long ago it was, I'm just going to obsess over that. It was a long time ago. Let's just put it there. Put it that way. But it was like July or August of like this specific year that I'm not being too specific about, of when I sent them those couple of pieces. And like between that and like March of the following year, I had a lot of like close calls with, let's just call it, like a lot of near misses, I guess, is the close calls are a bad thing. It's like when you almost get like a bullet through the head.
Right.
But near misses, I like where I like kept almost getting stuff in. And then like in March, ironically, when I just come back from a really, really bad open mic night at Upright Citizen Brigade Theater here in New York, UCB Theater. And it was a bad open mic because some of the comics in the audience were heckling the other comics. And I never understood the wisdom of that, or why it's like such a stupid thing to do, because
so dumb.
If you do that, the other comics are going to remember you. They're going to remember, I'm never giving this person stage time because they heckled me from the audience at the show that we were both a part of. Like, it's so counterproductive, and it's bullying. It's ridiculous. It's like, it's bullying. Really cruel.
Yeah.
You know,
it's messed
and it's
up.
like, what is, do you think that you're like, do you really think that if you're doing that your jokes are funnier than the people on stage? Like, no one's going to think that. And like, how pathetic are you where that's how you have to get your laughs? You know what I mean? You're also just cutting down other people from the audience. You're being the problem. Hecklers are the problem. No one, at no point has a comedian ever thought, oh, these hecklers are making the show better. They're improving the comedy. You know?
How do you get through that, like, when somebody's heckling you? Like, how do you avoid keeping them from throwing you off your game?
There's a couple of specific things you can do. And I've seen some people, and I was really new to this. I didn't know how to do it. Just, you can either engage or not engage. And both have their good. I think engaging is often, honestly, pretty smart, because they're not going to shut up. And if you just pretend like they're not there, they're just going to throw off your rhythm. So you might as well just like point out how stupid they're being and how rude and obnoxious they're being. And that's kind of it. I don't know that I was really good at doing that at that point, but I know that there's a lot of folks that were. But again, I never really took stand-up terribly seriously, just because my writing career took off after a while, and I was just like, okay, I gotta make a decision.
Right.
You know, what do I want to more specifically focus on?
Because you can only focus on so much.
Yeah, right? And it's kind of why I stopped drawing cartoons, because I was in the early part of my career, I was drawing one-panel gag cartoons, and I got like a few of them in Nickelodeon magazine and some other publications, and you know. But I haven't had a chance. I haven't really drawn any in a long time, like over 15 years, like professionally. And sometimes I'll think, oh, you know, maybe if I have like a hole in my schedule in like the next couple months, I'll draw some cartoons out and send them to different places. But I just haven't had time. Maybe I'll get time soon, you know, but I don't know. It's something I miss doing quite a lot. Especially when you're a freelance writer and you're working on a bunch of different projects at once. You're juggling so many different things that, like, I know there are other people who are writers / cartoonists who like have a writing career and a cartooning career, and they're totally separate, and they're able to keep those two things going simultaneously. And I have so much respect for people who can do that, because I haven't been able to do it. And like I said, maybe I'll find a way to juggle all those things, so I'll be able to do it at some point in the future, because it is something I do miss a lot, drawing cartoons. But these days I'm not able to do both.
At which point did you realize that you needed to double down on writing and kind of drop everything else? Like, what gave you that signal to say, I need to go all in on this?
There was a point pretty early on. I've been writing for Mad like for about 2 or 3 years, and I got this. I don't know whether it's an email or a letter in the mail, whether they sent it like snail mail, but there's this magazine that I thought about working for, sending some cartoons to. Oh, and they liked some of my cartoons, and they wanted to. They were doing like a book, like an anthology. Oh, it was Tricycle magazine. Do you guys know what that is? It's a Buddhist magazine. I don't even know if it's still around, but it's like this Buddhist magazine, and I think I had like a couple of like cartoons about Zen Buddhism in my portfolio at the time.
Oh, it's fun.
And so they liked that, and they were like, "Do you want to draw some? We can't take these, but do you want to draw some for this anthology book that we're putting this collection?" And I was like, "Oh, I really do, but on the other hand, I have like these magazine articles I'm writing that I'm getting paid for, and that I don't want to blow these deadlines." Do you know what I mean? As opposed to these cartoons that I don't know if they'll take them or not, and I don't know how much they're able to pay. And it's, you know, it's like these basic financial considerations that you have to take into account. And so it sucks because I really wanted to contribute to that collection, that tricycle collection, but I wasn't able to, unfortunately. And
it sounds like you know, it sounds pretty tough to do that, you know, as your main gig, you know, to put all your eggs in that basket, so to speak.
Yes, but given that, like I'm able to, like, I have a lot of different skills, and so I was able to parlay that into different types of writing. So like I've written like joke books and activity books, and, you know, for kids, and graphic novels and comic book stories and children's, but like, you know, children's board books, what are known as 8x8s, which is a specific format of children's book, like short stories for storybook collections for like Marvel, Disney short story collections. And so like all those different types of and a lot of nonfiction for both kids and adults, short stories for both kids and adults. And so like there's different types of writing that I've been able to do. And of course I work in television and video games. So it's, you know, you basically, the way I look at it is you're basically called upon to do these different types of writing, and people are like, well, have you written a joke book before? And if you haven't, you have to be honest and say, no, I haven't, but I've done this, this, and this, which is kind of like writing a joke. You know, I've written for TV shows that are comedy shows, and you know what I mean? Things like that. I've written for Mad. And so that basically gives you a lot of the skills that you would pour into writing something, a joke book. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's a similar skill set. They carry over, the skills transfer. So like this, the Bad Guys joke book, which I did write.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So in terms of writing, what is your favorite genre to primarily focus on?
Oh gosh. It's a tough question. It's difficult because like from 2015 to 2017 or 2018, I wrote 3 different Lego Star Wars books for Scholastic, which is also the same company I wrote the Bad Guys joke book for. I've been writing for Scholastic pretty regularly since 2015. And the first assignment I had was these 3 Lego Star Wars books. And I remember thinking at a certain point when I was writing them, oh, I could do this all day. I could just do nothing but writing Lego Star Wars, silly Lego Star Wars humor books and activity books and joke books, because they were for the most part children's humor books, but they also had activity sections and joke sections. Well, 2 of them did anyway, out of the 3 that I wrote. And they were just a lot of fun to work on. A lot of fun. The notes from Lucasfilm were pretty mild, where they seemed to like what I was doing and think that I had a good handle on the characters, because I grew up pretty obsessed with Star Wars, like a lot of kids. And so I think that showed. I think I obviously had a respect for the world, the galaxy of characters. It's not a universe, favorite? It's a galaxy. It's a galaxy far, far away, not a universe.
Yeah. What's your favorite Star Wars movie?
I don't know. It's hard to. I guess it would have to be Empire Strikes Back.
That's mine.
But I like, there's certain things that I really like about a lot of the other ones, and I think that there's big chunks of Return of the Jedi that I really love. I think that movie overall is quite good, and I think the first one, I think New Hope, is quite good. I think that there's this, I've noticed there's this complaint that people have about it online, where they're like, R2D2 and C3PO, the scenes where they're lost in the desert and Tatooine, they just go on forever, and it's like, no, they don't. There's like 2 shots of C3PO getting lost in the desert. You know why? Because George Lucas needs to communicate the fact that he's lost in the freaking desert. So he needs to actually take the time and like have it play out so that you get the fact that this robot, this neurotic robot, is who talks like a classic sort of stereotypical British butler, is lost in the desert. And so that needs to take his time and have that play out. I'm sorry that it can't be like 80 miles a second while it's happening. I'm sorry that it can't be. Maybe if you got something better to do, you can't watch these 2 shots of a robot getting lost. But I think you can. I think you can spend that time. I don't know why these ideas gain traction. I think it's like one YouTuber says that, and then another is like, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, well, it's tough because Star Wars fans are so diehard.
Yeah,
and a lot of them hate all the new stuff. They only like the original 3, which I can understand to some extent, but there's some really cool stuff in those newer ones as well.
I think so too. I really like the Acolyte. I really like Skeleton Key. I really like Andor. I like a lot of the newer Star Wars. The Mandalorian's pretty great. And of course a lot of the animated stuff like Maul the Shadow Lord is extraordinary. Have you guys seen it?
No,
I haven't seen it.
And Rebels is of course great. Clone Wars, Bad Batch. So there's a lot of good in the Star Wars Visions. There's some really great stuff.
Yeah, so, actually, one of our buddies did the what was it? The soundtrack to Clone Wars.
Oh,
yeah, the animated series.
The animated series, Clone Wars. A composer that we're friends with.
What's the person's name?
Oh, his name's Luke Trewin.
Oh wow,
he's done a lot of big stuff. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, I'm not familiar, but now I got to look it up after the interview. The music on these shows is pretty great too, and I listen to a lot of it while I'm writing. So
okay,
I can't listen to stuff that has lyrics in it because it's too distracting. I find that. Oh, and speaking of, I was showing you guys this beforehand, but if you don't mind, I wrote a story that's in this collection, the Fight the Empire collection of Star Wars Adventures. This is the IDW run, so it's not the Marvel run of Star Wars Adventures, but it's a story about Jabba the Hutt and Bib Fortuna, his majordomo, his assistant, his second in command. It's called Majordomo Major Problems, and it's basically that Bib Fortuna works so hard for Jabba, and Jabba is so demanding and such a stressful boss to work for that Bib Fortuna works himself sick and comes down with an illness that you can't say the flu because it's Star Wars. I don't know if the flu even exists in the world of Star Wars, but in the galaxy of Star Wars. But he's sick and he's bedridden and he can't come to work for a little while. And so Jabba is faced with the extraordinary task of having to find a replacement assistant for a few days, and he keeps killing all the assistants because they're just not as good as Bib. And of course, and also Jabba is extremely unreasonable. You realize when you write something like this, even if it's just like a short comic book story, that when you study the characters and the way they talk, it reveals so much about their personality, which is the mark of good writing often. And with Jabba, what's funny is that he talks like a big baby. He just uses short declarative sentences. He never says "I think" or "I feel" or "in my opinion." He's just like, "Do it now. Do it now."
He blurts stuff out.
Yes, he blurts stuff out. He's the ultimate horrible boss to work for, and because he's so clearly fragile, clearly insecure. So you'll see in the movies and TV shows, you see in the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi's like, oh, Jabba, master, you're so great and so mighty. Thank you for meeting with me. And it's like, and you think at first, you're like, why this guy's a Jedi? He could murder Jabba. Why is he kissing Jabba? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
because he needs to make a deal with Jabba. So he needs to play the game that everyone plays with Jabba, which is that you have to kiss his butt. It's just the way it goes. Even though we can see that, that Princess Leia does strangle him to death, and she's not even aware she's force sensitive at that point in the series. So she's not even using anything other than like your garden variety basic chain to do it. So
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it seems quite difficult to write a full book about a character like Jabba the Hutt because he doesn't necessarily have the most complex personality. Like, how do you fill a book like with a character like that?
Well, I'll tell you something though. As you said that, I was like, I don't know, that could be an interesting writing challenge. Like, what is the interior life of that character? I think it could work if you did get into him so insecure and what makes him tick. Like, what if you saw those aspects of him? You know what I mean? Then I think it could work really well because basically villains are uninteresting when you don't know the following bit of information about them, which is who or what do they care about? Specifically, especially who. Like, what they care about, okay, power, sex, love, respect, that is important, but also who do they care about? Because giving them someone that they care about, there's like a family member or a friend or a lover or something like that, it tethers the audience to that character. It means like this character is even more human because they care about someone. So if you find out who that person is in a Jabba the Hutt story, I think it makes him infinitely more interesting and also more relatable and sympathetic. So, which are two different things, relatable and sympathetic.
So in terms of screenwriting, what would you say are the characteristics of a good screenplay? What are, like, let's say 3 things that have to be in there for it to be good?
Okay. I think that it has to be very clear, and these might sound like really basic. I don't know if I can narrow it down to 3, but let's try. The protagonist has to actually act like a protagonist, and the protagonist doesn't have to be the hero of the story. The protagonist of Avengers Infinity War is Thanos, and it's very clear that the filmmakers, the screenwriters, and the directors are doing that on purpose, making Thanos the protagonist of the story. Where they've compared that movie to like a heist movie, and I guess I see the comparison. It's not a perfect analogy, but I get it. He's basically going through the movie and collecting all the Infinity Stones that he doesn't already own. He already owns like at least 2 or 3 of them at the beginning, and so the other, he's getting this. There's 6 in total, so he's getting all 6 throughout the course of the movie. But your villain can be the protagonist, but there has to be like a good reason for making the villain the protagonist. I think in that movie, it doesn't work unless the villain is the protagonist. Whereas I think in a lot of superhero movies, like everyone loves Tim Burton's Batman, but I don't think it's really a great Batman movie. I think the best Batman movies are the ones where Batman actually is the protagonist. That's why I think the Batman Begins is so good, because all the stuff that happens in the movie happens because of choices that Bruce Wayne makes, decisions that he makes when he's studying with Ra's al Ghul, when he's doing this, when he saves Ra's al Ghul's life, when he's doing that, he comes back to Gotham and becomes Batman. You know what I mean? So he is making the story happen. He is causing all the things to happen in the film. Sometimes your protagonist is the protagonist and the audience doesn't even know it. The protagonist of the first Avengers movie is Nick Fury, but a lot of people don't realize that because they're too busy paying attention to the superheroes, and technically it could be argued that Nick Fury is a type of superhero himself, because after all, it's not like you have to have superpowers to be a superhero. And Black Widow and Hawkeye in that movie are also SHIELD agents, and They don't have any powers. So same with Nick Fury. But he's the protagonist of that film. He causes Loki to invade. He causes all the things that he's doing with the Tesseract and with S.H.I.E.L.D. and all the stuff that he's doing. He brings the Avengers together, you know. But the important thing is that the screenwriter knows that Nick Fury is the protagonist of that film and that he's doing that on purpose. And I think in that case he was. And I know that Joss Whedon's a very problematic individual, and I'm not saying he's a great person or anything like that. I know he sucks. So I'm just using that as a specific example. That movie that happened to be written by him. Anyway, so I think that you need to have a very clear idea of who your protagonist is. They have to act like a protagonist. They have to drive the story forward. And the antagonist has to block them in terms of doing that. It has to be the obstacle in their way. And so the protagonist needs to have like a few specific things. They need to have a clear goal that's physically achievable. They have to, and it could be the most simple thing in the world. It can be to get a sandwich. They're starving and they want to get it. You know what I mean? If you can make that compelling, or if it's a comedy and you can make it funny and you think it can actually sustain an 1.5 or 2 hour movie with that, you know what I mean? Sure, why not? It would be tough to pull off, but they need to have a clear goal. They need to have a relatable, strong personality, and they need to have flaws, which again are relatable flaws, but it's tough because, look, you can have a movie or TV show with unlikable characters. Game of Thrones had unlikable characters, but they also had very likable characters. And I don't think the show would have been such a big hit if none of the characters were likable. For all the characters that you really enjoyed on that show, that you love to see what terrible, horrible thing they would do next. You also had characters who were trying to do the right thing, and characters who were trying to do something noble or heroic, or you know what I mean, and trying to just to find love or to save a member of their family, save their life, or you know what I mean, or get revenge. Yeah. Not that there's anything noble about getting revenge, but it's definitely understandable, especially in a show like that.
Like, how important is it to give a villain redeemable characteristic versus just making them outright hated?
It's a tough question, because I do think, look, I really liked James Gunn's Superman movie, and in that movie, you understand why Lex Luthor does what he does, but he's not a sympathetic character at all. But you understand what James Gunn is saying, and you understand the metaphor for xenophobia and things like that, and you understand that basically he's threatened. He feels threatened by Superman, and you know what I mean. And he feels threatened by aliens of all kinds because he can't compete with that. He's threatened. So you get why he is the way he is, and why he's putting all of his money and his resources into this campaign to destroy this alien who's just a big Boy Scout and just doesn't have a mean bone in his body, and we'll never see eye to eye with Superman. Although, in the sequel, supposedly they team up to fight Brainiac, from what I've heard. I don't know if that's exactly true, but I think that's what James Gunn said about the sequel. So it'd be really interesting to see. That's the thing. Lex Luthor is so unlikable, and I mean in the comics as well as in the James Gunn movie. So
right,
the fact that the idea that they will be teaming up, because that's what I've heard anyway. I could be wrong. That they'll be teaming up in the sequel. That's interesting to me, because it's really tantalizing. Because it's how does it? He's a good enough screenwriter, James Gunn, that I think he could make that work. And I am interested to see how he pulls that off. And so he's bought enough goodwill with the Guardians of the Galaxy movies and the Peacemaker TV show, and you know what I mean, and other films like Slither and stuff. He's done enough. He's talented enough, and he's reliable enough as an entertainer, as a filmmaker and storyteller and screenwriter, that you're gonna think, okay, let's see how this works. You know what I mean? Especially because it's not I like the fact that it takes a big swing, that idea. You know, is it that Lex Luthor like puts all his hatred of Superman behind him because now there's something that even he can see as a bigger threat than Superman, which is Brainiac, you know? So it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It's that whole thing. Is that what's going on? Or is it something different?
Yeah.
Who knows? But it's interesting, right? You're going to see it because you're just, oh, how do they pull that off? You know? So
writing wise, let me ask, what do you think about the Lord of the Rings series?
Oh, the Rings of Power?
No, just Lord of the Rings movies, the writing. What do you think about the writing for that?
Oh, the Peter Jackson ones?
Yes.
I assume you're not talking about the Ralph Bakshi ones and the Rankin Bass ones from the late 70s and early 80s, which are not great. They're interesting. You can see they're trying something new, but yeah, kind of like an interesting failure. The Peter Jackson ones are incredible, and they're specifically incredible because not only are they really good, they tell the story so well, and he fleshes out some of the characters that are sort of thinly written in the Tolkien books. And this is nothing against Tolkien, but some of the characters are more fleshed out than others. But I think Peter Jackson does a really good job, and his screenwriter, his co-writers, Francis Walsh and Philippa Boyens, I think they do a really good job of fleshing out all these characters and making them compelling and cinematic and everything. Yeah, I think those movies are extraordinary. And also you have to remember, and I'm sure both you guys know this, but those books had been thought to be unfilmable for decades. People thought, oh no, you can't. People have tried in the past, like Ralph Bakshi, and it hadn't been great. So, the fact that Peter Jackson and his co-writers were able to do this was just like a miracle. It was incredible.
Right.
But I think it also just had so much influence on storytelling around that time too. I think you can definitely make the case that that not just because some of the, I'm trying to think, is it the guy that played Ned Stark was in the Lord of the Rings movies? I know that's true. Trying to think if there's any other crossover, like the same any of the other actors from Lord of the Rings who wound up in Game of Thrones. But I do think that even though Game of Thrones was based on a very successful series of novels by George R.R. Martin, I also think that HBO might not have been so excited to make a TV show of it if it hadn't been for the success of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
I think that kind of pointed the way. As different as those two series are, and they're quite different. They're doing very different things. Song of Ice and Fire is doing something very different than Lord of the Rings.
Where do you?
Even though I think George R. R. Martin said,
where do you think Peter Jackson was able to succeed where others who tried it failed? Like, what was he able to do that others weren't?
I think that first of all, he was willing to just look at each character in the books and been like, okay, how can we come up with the most compelling and cinematic version of this character? Right. How can we and in some cases that meant changing what's in the books, and I think he was willing. You have to be willing to do that because it's an adaptation, and film is very different medium than prose. So I think that's part of it, that he's willing to do these things. He's willing to say, okay, I can't act like, to be respectful of the source material, respectful of the books, but I can't act like it's like I have a religious devotion to it. And I can't anything, if I change anything, it's heresy. So I think that's part of it too. And also he's willing to take what's there and extrapolate other things from it. There's some of this is in the books, the whole thing where Smeagol kills his cousin and gets the ring. I think it's his cousin, and gets the ring from him and everything. And Smeagol and Deagle, I think it's Smeagol and Deagle.
Smeagol, yeah.
So that's in. I'm trying to think if that scene has any stuff that's not in the books. I don't know.
The Hobbit movies were really good as well. I don't know if you saw those.
Yeah, I thought they were decent. I thought the Lord of the Rings movies were better.
Yeah.
It's weird because I thought that the Battle of the Five Armies was the one I liked least, because I thought that it's very difficult. I have a problem with action sequences where the geography isn't clear, where it's not clear like who's fighting who and what's going on, and just felt very blurry and very weirdly choreographed and very like. I understand the impulse to make the Battle of Five Armies its own separate movie, because in the book that takes up like 3 pages or something, and you could make an entire like war movie about that, where it stands on its own and it's the final part of this big trilogy. So I get it. I'm not one of those people who thinks that that's a bad idea to make that movie, but I do think if you do it, you have to be clearer in your storytelling, and I think that's where that movie, for me at least, kind of falls apart. But because I think there's I think that you can have this thing with that movie where if it's told different, if the story's told differently, where it almost becomes like a 2-hour version of like the portals sequence and like the battle for Earth in Avengers Endgame, where it just becomes like you have this faction's coming in from this side to help you, and this faction's coming in from that side, and this faction's against you, but you need to like give all that stuff time to build itself up properly, and
it needs clarity, right?
Yeah, it needs to have much more clarity. And I mean, you can do, look, the battle for Earth sequence in Avengers Endgame is extraordinary. It's great, it's really emotional. It's really moving. The character Tony Stark dies. It's a great death scene, and the funeral afterwards is wonderful and everything. It's really good. There's great emotional beats in that movie in general, anyway, in Endgame. And but that's some of the strongest stuff. You have to.
Yeah.
Are there any techniques you take from Peter Jackson to apply to your own work?
It's a good question. It's funny you ask, because like years and years ago, and I'm listed as a creative consultant on this movie, but I worked on this film called Dweegans and the Leprechauns, which is it's you can find it now. It's like video on demand and everything. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere, but I worked on it. I was a script doctor on it. I spent like a summer as a script doctor working on it, and like some of it was rewriting battle sequences. There's a lot of action sequences in the third act, and some of it was reworking the love interest, and she was very different before I got to that script, before I reworked parts of it. And some of it was these action sequences, and I really studied like the Lord of the Rings action sequences and thought, like, how can I bring some of that flavor into it, even though this is a kid's movie, but it takes place in a fantasy world, and you know what I mean? How can I bring some of like the integrity that Peter Jackson has, and so how can I bring some of like the emotional quality to it? And I think the changes worked. I had a fun time working on that project. That was cool.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your time at NYU?
Yeah. Well, what specifically?
Oh, just the general experience of it, and what did you actually take from school to then apply to your long-standing career, or just kind of everything that you've done after NYU? What kind of led up to that?
Well, it's funny because my daughter's as I've had this conversation with her before, where there were certain things that I did that I did at NYU that I thought at the time, I thought, and for a few years afterwards, I thought, oh, this is nothing that's happened to me at NYU is actually paying off and giving me a career. But that turned out to be the exact opposite of what was happening, because it was so many things that I did at NYU have actually had a direct impact on my career. I'll give you a couple of examples. I interned at Little Golden Books in college, and now I am a Little Golden Books author. In fact, I was telling you guys before the call that I wrote this. Avengers Day of Doom, where Avengers fighting Doctor Doom. And again, it's not an adaptation of Avengers Doomsday, although the title is similar. Obviously, that's on purpose. But I wrote this, and I'm really happy with the way it came out. But the only thing it has in common with Avengers Doomsday, because I haven't read the script for that movie,
Okay,
is that it's the Avengers fighting Doctor Doom, and that's it. Some of the same Avengers, obviously the Sam Wilson Captain America. I think that's actually it as far as the the cover, because Tony Stark's dead, and so it's kind of ironic because you got two characters played by Robert Downey Jr. in here, and Natasha Romanoff is dead by the time of Doomsday, and so T'Challa is as well. So it's not like Shuri's in the movie, but this is clearly not Shuri. It's clearly the T'Challa Black Panther. But that's all because, it's not just because I interned at Little Golden Books in college, but basically to give you the very short version of how that came to pass. I interned for some really nice editors named Chris Angelilli and Dennis Shealy in college when I at Little Golden Books. And then years and years and years later, I just reconnected with them. I just reached out to them by email and was like, hey, do you guys maybe need authors for any of the projects you're working on? And after 4 years of hearing no, they finally said yes. And they were going to give me a Ghostbusters. This is going to be because I've worked on I've written Little Golden Books for 10 years now. So in 2016, they were going to have me write the 2016 Ghostbusters Little Golden Book, but at the time, I think it was either that or it was it was the 2016 one, because I think that it needed to be written in-house because the studio was very wary of like the script getting leaked, as well they should, because there was the Sony leak, and there was someone hacked, Sony and like put a lot of the scripts like online and everything, unfortunately. And spilled a lot of the secrets as far as what their upcoming movies were going to be about. So they didn't want that to happen. So it had to be written in house by one of the editors at Penguin Random House, and so it was like a consolation prize. They were like, "Do you want to write another Little Golden Book that has to do with ghosts?" This being the Strange Little Golden. We did, and it was my first time writing a Little Golden Book. Wasn't my first time writing a licensed character children's book, but I had only done like a few at that time, so I was relatively new to that too. And I spent so long writing that book. I just like poured so much time into it because I was like, I want to make a really good first impression so that they give me other books.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because it's they're paying you to write it, but it's in a way like a writer's audition. Because the idea being that if they like what you do, you get to keep writing these, and that is what happened. But oh man, I spent and this is a big part of my writing process too, by the way, is that I draw thumbnail sketches as I'm writing the script, sometimes before I write the script.
Right.
And so like with something like this, because a big part of writing a Little Golden Book, it's sort of like writing a comic book, which is that you're not only are you writing the text the reader sees, you're also writing the art notes to the illustrator that tell the illustrator what to put on every page. Obviously, the editor has a lot of input in terms of that.
Sure.
I'm not saying they don't, but you need to have a very clear idea of what you want on every page as the author. You can't be like, oh, just put whatever you want, because the
100%,
the illustrations inform the story, and are part of the story, and they are part of the plot, and that is how you get the plot across. It's not just the text, it's not just the prose. It's also what the reader sees on every page, and so that has to carry some of the heavy lifting in terms of telling the story. And so like it becomes then a visual medium, writing these. much like writing comics, much like writing TV scripts. And so for all those mediums, what I often do, even for some of my work as a video game writer, I draw a lot of thumbnail sketches while I'm writing this stuff. And it's like these little storyboards or comics. And what it does to me is it helps me put my head in the game. It helps me like get in the right headspace to write this stuff.
Like visualization, right?
Yes, it's visualization. Exactly. Because the thing is that when you do that, what it does for me anyway, it might work differently with other people. And that's why I'm fully aware that this might not be an ideal process for other people. But for me, it's a big part of my process. But everyone's brain works differently, you know? So for me, it works because for me, what it does is if I'm like, let's say I'm drawing, like, you know, one of the pages in here, it's got like, because it helps you figure out where everyone is in connection with everyone else. Yeah, because I remember, God, it was just like a year before this came out that I even wrote this. So I remember very specifically like drawing little thumbnail sketches of Captain America and Black Widow, like floating in midair and bumping into each other, you know, being uncontrollably floating in midair. They can't control where they're floating. And so whoop, they bump into each other. And yeah, you have to draw it in thumbnail sketches. No one else sees that, but you're describing what you're drawing as the art notes or stage directions or scene description or whatever you want to call it, depending on what medium it is. And so to me, it then becomes like those little drawings are like actors who are acting it out. And so it's like I'm seeing it put up on its feet. I'm seeing what it looks like when actors are performing it. I'm seeing what it's sort of kind of going to look like when an illustrator is drawing it. So you're seeing what it's going to look like, and you can then see if there's any problems with it or issues with it. You can then see whether, for example, like, is it clear what I was talking about geography, like with the Hobbit movie, like, is it clear if you're writing an action sequence, is it clear where everyone is in the scene? Is it clear what's happening? Right. Is there any dead air? You know, is there any dead air? I've written comic book stories where, because of the fact that I like drew thumbnail I like sketched out the action sequences before I wrote them up. Like, I saved myself the trouble. There are no panels where it's unclear what's happening. There are no panels where it's not, where there's not like a, what's the word? Where there's not like a flow between from panel to panel, where it's not flowing really organically and really naturally,
right?
Panel to panel, you know, like it's like Superman fights Doomsday, and then like he's knocking his fist is going into Doomsday's face, and Doomsday's falling back from the impact, and then in the next panel, Doomsday like slugging. I wrote a Superman story for DC once, a long time. It was a very short one. It was a Superman Hanukkah story where Superman fights a snow golem. And it came out in 2009, so it was that long ago. But half of the story was, almost all the story was an action sequence. It was mostly, it was 4 pages, and the first 2 pages were an action sequence.
Okay.
And so you have to keep it moving, and you have to try and condense, pack as much story into those 4 pages as as you can, because I thought they were going to give me like 6 or 8 pages to tell that story, but nope, all they had was 4 pages. It's an anthology. It's the DC Universe Holiday Special. You only got 4 pages. And I'm like, oh no, I've got to tell what's essentially an 8-page story in 4 pages.
That's tough.
You got to figure out how to make it work. So you got to cut out panels that like you don't need. What don't I need? You know what I mean? How can I tell the story in a way? It's almost like low budget filmmaking. You know, you got to figure, what do I absolutely need? What can I do without? And then you have to restructure it, and then you have to redo the thumbnails for a 4-page story.
But hey, man, we're getting to the top of the hour. I don't want to cut you off, man, but we got to get a part 2. But before we get out of here for this episode, do you want to leave our audience with any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. I don't know. Let's see. I love writing for a living. I love getting to do this. I'm incredibly grateful. I wrote like a children's book about nonfiction book years ago about gratitude as a character virtue. And ever since then, I thought about that a lot because I did a lot of research on it, on gratitude, and how it's thought of in mental health circles and things like that. And, you know, and that I think it's just it's a good idea to just consider the fact that like the people that you're grateful to and the people that have helped you get to where you are. And I think about that literally every day. And, because I didn't get here on my own, you know?
Yeah.
And I know that I'm very privileged and very lucky to be making a living as a writer in 2026.
Yeah.
And the world like exploding all around us and everything.
Yeah.
Somehow,
I mean, my final question for you would be, you know, for our listeners that want to get into the type of stuff that you're doing, and you do a lot of different things, but you know, what's the one main tip you would give to someone who's maybe just going into college or just graduating from college? What would you say to them?
Okay. A couple things. First of all, very quickly, like I was sort of hinting at a minute ago, when I was talking about Little Golden Books, a lot of the internships I had in college, actually did have a profound effect on what I ended up doing for a living. Like, you know, I interned at Mad. I ended up writing humor pieces for Mad. Interned at Little Golden Books. Ended up writing Little Golden Books. Some of them, anyway. I don't want to make it sound like I write all of them. I did not get to write the Gilmore Girls Little Golden Book, and I was very jealous because I love that TV show, and someone else got to write it. But I guess it's going to happen sometime. Anyway, you know, I was friends with a guy named John Cooperson in NYU, and he's been just a huge factor in my video game writing career. He gave me my first job as a writer and a script writer in video games. We're working on a project right now together. And so like just the people that you meet when you're at that stage in college, the people that you meet, you know, you might end up working together if you have shared interests, if you have things that, you know, things in common, you have like think you're obsessed with the same things that you know what I mean? You see the world in somewhat the same way, or you see the world in a different way and you bounce off of each other in a fun, creative way. You know what I mean?
That's the beauty of writing, right?
Yeah. You just have like a respect for each other. And so I'd say like, partially it's that, like, don't assume that because things aren't going the way they're supposed to go right away, that that's not going to eventually happen. Give it time. And the other thing is, and I can't stress this enough, there were people that I knew in college because I was studying playwriting and screenwriting, right? NYU has a really good program for that. There were people I knew that I was really good friends with, and I thought, oh, absolutely, they're going to be so much more successful at this than I am. And the only reason they weren't is because they just gave up on it very early on.
Wow.
So I think there's something to be said for perseverance.
Resilience.
Yes, absolutely, resilience.
Willpower.
So yeah, I think that's, I mean, like, and then everyone has stories like that. You know, Lenny Bruce had stories about like people he knew in his neighborhood that he thought were funnier than he was, but they didn't go into like comedy professionally, and that's the only reason that he was able to make, and they weren't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of comedians have stories like that. Like, oh, I knew this guy in my neighborhood who was so much funnier than me, but he didn't decide to make a career out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like I think perseverance is such a big part of it. And also it takes a while to get good at it, no matter what your creative discipline is.
No matter what you're doing, you really have to like lock in and just really put the blinders on for a second. And it's like I teach drums, and like one of my drum students, he's 11, you know, he wants to play keyboard, but the dad said, hey, let's get this drum thing going on first, and then you can do whatever, you know, after you got
walk before you can run.
Yeah, get the foundation first, you know.
Yeah, Exactly. And I mean, like, look, there were things I was good at as a writer when I was studying writing in college. Always good at writing jokes, always good at writing funny, clever dialogue. Um, almost to the point where I took it for granted, because it came naturally to me. Was not good at the time at story structure. I was just talking to my wife about this because she and I knew she and I met each other in college. That's when we were studying the same thing. And she understood a lot of this stuff instinctually, a lot of stuff about plotting, story structure, things like that. I just did not know. I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to get the hang of this. But eventually you do. Eventually you've studied it and you've tried it you've written so many terrible scripts that one of them isn't terrible. And then one of them is actually good. And then one of them is kind of great. And then you know what I mean?
Steps. And so just stepping up, going higher and higher, better and better.
It's like anything, it's like anything. It's like playing football. It's like playing drums. It's like any kind of discipline that you do. You are going to suck at first, and that's okay because everyone goes through that, but eventually you won't suck anymore. So I don't know if that's my like inspirational moment right there, but it's true. It's absolutely true. And I'm living proof of that. Awesome. Eventually I did start to understand story structure. And eventually you're like, oh, I see it now. I see it in my head. I see the way the stories should be structured and the way it's going to play itself out. A plot twist here, and that leads to this, and that leads to this. You know what I mean? And you start to see it in your head. It's like that meme of like the, you know what I mean? Of all the like math equations popping out in front of your face. And you start to see it that way.
That's great advice, man. We gotta get you back so we can dive, because I know you have a lot more to share. But before we get out of here for this episode, where's the best place for our audience to find you at?
Well, I have a website, which is ariekaplan.com, and I post a lot of updates as to what's going on. I just recently posted that I won the Greenspoon Jewish Story Award for my graphic novel, The Day I Became a Potato Pancake, which is a Hanukkah-themed graphic novel. And I'm not exactly certain when this episode is coming out, but if it's coming out around the winter holidays, then perfect. It came out from Berman House 2 years ago, but it's coming out in a new PJ Library edition, so it should get into the hands of a lot of kids because PJ Library has a really wide reach, and I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome.
It goes out to kids everywhere. And so that's one of the things I'll be talking a little more about on my website. And I'll also be posting about a lot of other new projects there. And you can also find me on Instagram at Arie Kaplan Writer. And I'm also on Facebook and Threads and Blue Sky.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah,
and LinkedIn for what it's worth.
And LinkedIn.
And LinkedIn.
Which is where I think where I met you guys, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. There you go.
I love LinkedIn.
Yeah, me too. I actually think it's pretty underrated in terms of like networking.
That's how I met Kevin. I met Kevin through LinkedIn.
No kidding.
Now we do the show together.
Funny. There you go.
Never know.
Yeah. I've gotten writing assignments through LinkedIn. It's and people, the joke used to be that just doesn't happen, but I'm absolutely here to tell you that it does.
No, we definitely appreciate you, man, and we'll definitely get you back. And we'd also like to thank everybody for tuning in. But we'll catch